What's up, guys? PDC here, and today we're going to be doing a competitive analysis video, basically, on something which, I haven't been requested to do it, but I'm sure you all have a feeling about it and have an opinion on it. It's not as controversial as Stealth Rock or Velocified Vids, but it is an ability that I'm sure you all know, Regenerator, and this is going to be my thoughts on it, and why it was implemented, its consequence, and maybe a little bit of theory at the end on why exactly, what would happen if we got rid of Regenerator. So, right off the bat, I'm just showing you guys in the background, you can see this is a poster boy team for Regenerator. You got the Tangrowth, you got a TOXAPEX, you got 2 Regenerator Muns on a stall team, which is pretty commonplace. There's almost always a Regenerator Mun nowadays present in a game, I feel. Maybe not almost always, but it's pretty common to see it. And in this video, I hope to explore a bit why. So let's begin. Let's start. I had to cut something there real quick. Generation 5. This was when Regenerator actually became present in the metagame. And there are quite a few reasons why, I think. I think, first of all, Regenerator, in a way, was Game Freak's way of basically keeping the balance, because there's been a power creep essentially every generation. What I mean by that is that the Pokemon in general get stronger. There are reasons for this that are not just purely game-based. I think a lot of the reasons rely just on people wanting really strong stuff to beat the hell up of it, like beat other shit up with. I think that's one of the big reasons for a power creep. And in response to this power creep with Muns like Terrakion, Keldeo, I can't think of any other things at the moment. Oh, Excadrill, it's right in front of me. Rain Dance, Polydode, Tornadus, Thundurus, all this stuff, in response to there being a power creep, they had to make a bit of a defense creep as well. And that's what they did with Regenerator. Regenerator is the response of Game Freak. It is introduced in Gen 5 simply because we need a way to make sure that a lot of the Pokemon that are really, really strong and introduced don't exactly completely break the metagame. Because I do wonder if, like, Slowbro, Tangrowth, Amoonguss, Mola, if all this stuff wasn't, like, around, I kind of do wonder if we would have banned, like, certain Muns, especially, like, earlier on in the metagame in Black and White. Like, it is possible that maybe Terrakion would have been banned. It's possible. I mean, I wouldn't say it's likely, but I mean, I'm not really going in depth in like what would have happened if Regenerator never happened, because I think it's far too big of a conjecture. I mean, if it were removed, I can make some vague guesses. But for the most part, I think we can all agree that Regenerator is a very important part of almost all teams in every generation now. It's something that you have in the back of your mind, that this Pokemon is going to be healing without the trainer actually doing anything, and that's pretty crazy. That's why I think it was introduced. And in Generation 5, I'm going to go very vague on the role it plays, because I'm sure most of you guys have at least, experienced, like, Gen 5 and up. You see Regenerator mostly on more defensive or balance-based teams. You see Amoonguss a lot on, like, the Tyranitar teams. Overall, Regenerator is not exceptionally common outside of Amoonguss. Mienshao has actually been used a bit more recently as well on Sand Spike Stall teams, because Regenerator on an offensive Mun is actually really interesting because it can block out things like hazard damage, Life Orb recoil, sand, and Mienshao does a really good job of doing that. But Amoonguss is really the most common one you see. I've seen Mola on some balances, and it's really, really annoying. I have seen, I use the Slowbro Amoonguss core very often on one of my favorite Black and White teams, at least for noob killing, the Marth Sandstall. And Tangrowth is somewhere in the middle, in which it's really good in that it has incredibly high defense and can switch into things like Keldeo without, well, actually, not without a lot of worry, but it can switch into things like Keldeo if you really want to invest a little special defense in it. It can switch into Terrakion. Overall, Regenerator Muns kind of become all use. I feel that in general, Regenerator allows a Pokemon to fill way more roles than it normally would be able to. It's a sponge. It's an ability that allows you to be a defensive tank both on the field and off the field, because With offense, a lot of your strategy relies on chipping down walls through double switches, and Regenerator doesn't eliminate that, but it certainly makes it harder. So then we have Regenerator in Gen 6, and this is where you have the most amount of Regenerators in the metagame. You have 5. I mean, yeah, you technically have this many in black and white. I mean, that's not wrong, but you don't see Mienshao, you don't see Tangrowth, you don't see Mola all that often, and you don't even see Slowbro very much either. It's really just Amoonguss as the main one. The Gen 6 has the most number of them that we'll see. I mean, right there, TDK's got 2 on his team, the Torn and the Mola. And for what it's worth, Gen 6 is a metagame that I think you can really start to see the Regenerator effect taking hold. Regenerators are everywhere in the metagame. And it's the first generation where you get a ultra-viable Pokemon, an A+ Pokemon in Tornadus T, which has Regenerator. It's an offensive Mon, which is fast. It can fit on essentially every type of team except for hard stall, and it functions as both an offensive pivot and a pretty decent tank. I mean, it doesn't die to very much, and it's strong enough that it can scare out a lot of things and be a real big problem for offensive-based builds that are light. All of the Mons in this slide are viable at a very high level. Every single Mon that has Regenerator, except for, or at least every single Mon that has Regenerator that you see in OU is great. There are no gimmicks in the main players here. They're all amazing. And given that ORAS, as I'm sure you know, is a metagame that is really heavily focused on antics of stalling and defense and overall a balanced and bulky offense-centric playstyle, I'm sure you can all see the effect that Regenerator has in the metagame. It's heavily abused by hard stall as well, or at least it was. I mean, I don't really... After the Dugtrio ban and the Mega Sableye ban, you don't see, like, really those incredibly hard stalls anymore, but I'm sure most of you played when Sableye and Dugtrio were in the metagame, so I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I say, like, the really hard stall, the Chansey Doug or Chansey Band Weavile stall, that type of stall. And there's, of course, a reason for that, as usual, because stalls like that really desperately need something that can neutralize offensive pressure. Band Weavile is one way of doing that. But Regenerators, in another way, also do that as well, because, like I said, they help keep things under control. They make it hard for offensive teams to break through just a good prediction, because they can just heal back up on a switch out. And then you have Gen 7. It's literally just TOXAPEX. It is literally just disciples of fucking TOXAPEX. And TOXAPEX is the main player here. Tangrowth was... It's not as common anymore, but Tangrowth was real common as well. And Tornty isn't used that much, and neither is Mola, although I assume Mola is viable. It's really just TOXAPEX. So while I can only say there's only one ultra-viable Regenerator in the metagame, you still have to admit that the metagame is incredibly focused on that one Regenerator. If TOXAPEX did not have Regenerator, it would not be as good. No way in hell would it be nearly as good as it is now. I think it'd still be viable because it has Recover, and it has T-Spikes, and has Haze, but TOXAPEX loses a lot of its viability and usefulness on every team if you take away that Regenerator. And now we'll actually talk about what Regenerator does. I think that overall, Regenerator is a mediator. What do I mean when I say Regenerator is a mediator? Do I mean it's like a fusion between all team styles? Yes, I do. Do I mean that it's completely delegitimizing offense? No. But I am saying that the metagame is becoming a lot more blended because of Pokemon with Regenerator, and I think this applies to nearly every metagame where Regenerator is really hyper-present in. Mostly Gen 6 and Gen 7. I feel like Gen 5 is different because Defog simultaneously affects Regenerator in a way which is way different than Rapid Spin, but I'll get into that later. What I want to talk about right now is how I think Regenerator has truly affected the metagame in that it's made balance and bulky offense the true, only super really good style. I mean, hard stall is really good too, but that is a little bit matchup oriented. But overall, I mean, look at SPL, and you'll see just how often balanced and bulky offense teams are used. Those are almost the exclusive types, and I think it's almost been universally agreed that those types of team styles are the best, unless you're going for a matchup call. I really do not think that hyper offense is that viable in Gen 7 right now or Gen 6. I think balance and bulky offense, maybe a bit more offensive based. You can go that sometimes with things like Metagross, all that. But overall, I think it's pretty clear that Regenerator has basically shifted the team building paradigm into a slower form, and everything is more balanced and bulky offense oriented. It makes pure offense a lot harder because if you've noticed, or if you've ever played a heavy offense team, and you're playing against somebody who is at least, let's say, decent at this game, knows what they're doing, it's hard to break teams nowadays with a pure hyper offense build. You can't just fire off predictions, because even if you get them right, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful, because things have Regenerator. Things can actually eliminate and get rid of your momentum just by switching out and recovering a third of their HP. Hyper offense used to really be able to wear down opponents, but now that hyper offense can't always keep hazards up anymore because of defog, and has the momentum and double switching often canceled by Regenerator, you don't have that option always anymore. It's very hard to wear down Regenerator Pokemon with hazards, if not impossible, because you essentially need a full layer of spikes and rocks just to actually wear it down. You need to have everything, all your eggs in the basket, and double switching to weaken ones with hazards works, but not when you have a Pokemon which is essentially a catch-all in TOXAPEX and Regenerator on its back. You have a way to negate that. You have a way to make team styles favor the defense because offense just isn't as great. And it's weird to say because we have offensive giants and mechanics in this metagame. We have things like Z moves, which are ridiculous. I mean, when you really think about it, if I was to give you a situation or ask a hypothetical years back and I said, we have moves that have up to 200 base power or more now, or, double the strength of them, and you can use them on setup sweepers, I think the average person would think, wow, that would be killer to Stall, because how can Stall keep up with this? But you don't see that at all, because it is a one-time thing. Maybe if Z moves you could use them multiple times, you could potentially make Regenerator, or defensive styles a little worse, and really offensive teams would be really good. But since you can only use them once, it doesn't change all that much. It's a one-time thing. It's set up in, maybe a bait or something like that. It's not permanent. Regenerator makes offense a lot harder to use and makes everything into defense. I remember Blunder said this in his Stealth Rock video, which actually inspired me to make this vid. He said that if we eliminated Stealth Rock, or he actually mentioned Regenerator with the example, but he said that Stealth Rock is not essentially enough to wear down, or at least I think this is what he said, Stealth Rock and double switching is not enough to wear down defensive teams anymore, and getting rid of Stealth Rock would make defensive teams even harder to play against. And that's 100% true, because if you got rid of rocks, I mean, just imagine how gruesome it would be for the average offense team to break down something like TOXAPEX. 2 KOs become 3 KOs. You have to carry spikes, which is why I think banning Stealth Rock in any of these generations would essentially be ridiculous, if not outright the incorrect thing to do, because you're fundamentally altering the state of any metagame completely if you ban Stealth Rock. If you're going to ban Stealth Rock, you have to do it at the very start, because you're going to create a metagame which is then so ludicrously defensive unless some other really viable counterplay exists. The next thing I want to talk about with Regenerator is how it alters stall fundamentally, specifically in Gen 6 and Gen 7. And this is more because of defog, but I think that defog and Regenerator and their consequences go hand in hand. I think that they're incredibly similar in what they do. What I think Defog does is because in Gen 5 you have Regenerators, but they're not incredibly present. They're not, everywhere. You have Amoonguss, you have the occasional other Regenerators, but it's not like they're in your face. In Gen 6 and Gen 7, especially Gen 6, oh, they're in your face. There's a Regenerator on nearly every team. But if you look at, Stall, and you consider the effect that Defog has, you notice that Defog has obviously made hazards way easier to remove, and it's made team choice more versatile in a way. Or at least it allows for different months to spin and has different team archetypes, whether, based on whether you're using Defog or whether you're using Rapid Spin. It's not like you only have a few viable Rapid Spinners anymore. You have a few viable Defoggers now, especially in Gen 7. But it's all about the elimination of hazards. Stall is not reliant on hazards anymore. Stall uses rocks, and that's it. It can use spikes, but very rarely will it use spikes Skarmory over Defog Skarm. I'm more specifically talking about Gen 6, because even though this is banned now, the Sableye, Dugtrio stalls, which had Skarms like this, I'm sure you can all tell, or at least I'm sure you all understand or remember what these teams were like. I am positive you all know the whole, old ladder stall that used to be on Gen 6. If not, I'll put up a graphic and I'll show you guys what the teams used to be like. But let's look at it from this perspective. How has Stall been affected by Regenerator, and has Defog contributed to it? Or how has Defog contributed to it? With Defog, hazards are gone easier. And in Gen 5, you could stack up spikes and you could wear down Regenerators, not incredibly easy, but it'd be easier. Because you don't have a way to get rid of hazards like that. You have to spin, you have to switch in a spinner, and you have to have a consequence. I mean, you can switch in a ghost, you can usually pursuit a Starmie. I mean, Excadrill is viable for sure, but I think there's still more consequence in spinning than defogging. Or at least less viability in it with the choices you have to actually carry out that action. With defog, you remove hazards. And Stall is very well aware that it can't function with a spin blocker anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore, because most teams are going to be carrying defog. So Stall has to break away. It has to stop that role of just stacking hazards, because that doesn't function the way it used to for it. What Stall instead has to do is function purely on its survivability. And if Regenerator was not around, this would not be possible. Could Stall survive if you got rid of Regenerator? Could the hard stalls you've seen really function nearly as well if you get rid of it? Probably not. Or at least you'd have a very, very nuanced, specialized build of Stall. Regenerator makes Stall. It alters it. It allows for it to survive on its own without using PP. And that's, obviously why you see Regenerator Stall wars on the ladder sometimes, where it's just endless switching, never switching out. That is a condition which is created by Defog and Regenerator, and because Stalls don't really abuse hazards in the same way they used to anymore. If you're in a Stall v Stall matchup, it will, at least a true Stall v Stall matchup in Gen 7, it only comes down to switching out. Switching back in and switching back out, because any other play is a losing play. You're losing PP, you're losing momentum. And yeah, sometimes they start off with offense, but usually it only ever devolves into a switching contest. And that's it. Gen 5, I mean, you still have Stall with its roots, but it's not exactly the same as Gen 6 or Gen 7. Regenerator is really just outstalling the opponent with status or otherwise now. Or making the other opponent kill themselves with Life Orb, or wasting PP, or keeping rocks up, or just very minuscule passive damage. Because Regenerator, like I said, kills momentum, and it makes it very, very hard, or at least adds the extra layer for teams to have to break it. Purely offense teams have a lot of trouble with it, and rarely are able to do it immediately. So, that's what Regenerator does, essentially. I think it became the mediator, and I think, fundamentally, our metagames are shaped by the passive effect that Regenerator and Defog, of course, generate. I could technically make a Defog video as well, but I think the two are intertwined, and I think I can't really talk about Defog without Regenerator, or I can't talk about Regenerator without Defog, so I'm just including that. I'm not going to go in-depth on Defog's effect, but just know that it's really an addition, and it's definitely supplementing Regenerator's mass effect on the metagame. So what if we get rid of Regenerator? What if we give TOXAPEX, I don't know, Poison Point, or just some other decent ability, I don't know, maybe Water Absorb? What if we gave these Pokemon a different ability, and Regenerator never existed? What would happen then, if we got rid of Regenerator? Because I'm sure a lot of people would, vote for a Regenerator ban, or getting rid of Regenerator, because at least for the casual player, it's very annoying to constantly have to play balances and have to constantly ditch your offense for a team which has survivability in its own part. Stall, or at least modern, heavy, hard, balanced stall becomes a little less viable, of course. You're not going to see these incredibly defensive play, because without Regenerator, with the power creep, it's a lot harder to manage. Imagine if TOXAPEX was gone from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Imagine the effect that would have on the metagame. You literally are eliminating a S-rank catch-all Pokemon. You're dumping it in the ground. Getting rid of Regenerator, if you did it immediately, I think would be a bad idea. I think you would have to do like a thesis paper round of study on like, okay, what the fuck happens if I get rid of this ability? Because I think that the metagame would change completely fundamentally, and I think it might actually represent something more like Diamond and Pearl. We have to ask ourselves the question, has the power creep become so big that if we get rid of something like Regenerator, we basically have to rethink our entire tiering decisions? I mean, if you got rid of Regenerator, do you think Zygarde would be more broken without things like Tangrowth, or at least would they have been earlier on in the metagame? I mean, if you get rid of Regenerator, do you think water types or random threats, or I don't know, any Pokemon that's really strong that TOXAPEX blocks would become ridiculous? I can tell you for one thing that if we got rid of Regenerator, offense teams would become a lot more viable, or at least the hyper offense team, because now they have that momentum canceling eliminated, and while they still have the tool of Defog to get rid of hazards, the automatic switch in and healing, which cancels prediction, is gone. You don't have that anymore. Offense becomes viable to a very high level. And the overall metagame shifts away from this defensive momentum-based center. I think that if you get rid of Regenerator, it spreads out. The spectrum becomes wider. Because, yeah, will balance and bulky offense still be my forte and one of my favorite styles? Yeah, sure. But you can bet that there are going to be a lot of people that now decide to run offense, because it's just more viable and better now, because you are able to actually break through teams with ease, or at least without having to strain yourself, and have specific counters built in, for Regenerators and stuff like that. It makes offense more viable and more diverse, because there are specialized offense teams in Gen 6 and Gen 7. There have been times where hyper offense has been a great style, but it has never lasted. Look at the longevity of hyper offense in metagames now. Look at the longevity of the hyper offense craze in Gen 6, when there was that Talonflame Mega Alakazam team that I think Badass built, Life Orb Me. Why do you think teams like that don't survive for very long? Because they can't. I mean, you had that team with that CBB made, I forget when he made that, it was the Garchomp Bisharp Scizor one, which is overall a solid build, but it's really solid because it also helps beat out and counter Defog. The main allure of a team like that is that it takes out Defog, one of the main passive instruments of Regenerator and defensive-based teams. The team is based on countering defense solely because it had things like, the SD Megazord and the SD Garchomp, just non-stop setup. which didn't even rely that incredibly heavy on prediction as much as it relied just on you need to break shit apart. That's my thoughts on that, at least. I think Regenerator has made those teams more into a trend or a reaction than actually a staple in the metagame. Because even in Gen 7, I mean, you had things like sticky web offense. That's true as well. I mean, if somebody asks me, you're like, oh, well, I mean, the metagame is, you have plenty of stuff. You have sticky web offenses, you know, the main thing. You have things like, I remember there was that Rain hyper offense team that was present a while ago. But if you look at the metagame right now, do you really have that? How present are those features? Where are they? Do you see the sticky web offense and do you see the Rain hyper offense that much anymore, with things like TOXAPEX being really brought back into the spotlight of being one of the, if not the best mon in the metagame? When I talk about Regenerator, I think of it as a mediation, a middle ground. It's a feature that has essentially made the metagame neutral. It blurred the spectrum into the more defensive section, and overall, I don't know if banning it is any right decision. And I would never even think about implementing a ban right now. I think that you kind of have to leave it be, because that is such a heavy tiering decision that I don't think we can even make it anymore. If we ban Regenerator, will we have to ban a lot more offensive threats? Probably. Would maybe the metagame become more diverse? Yeah, I can see that, but diversity doesn't always mean it's healthy, and Smogan's mission has never been to create an amazing ultra-fun metagame. It's been to create the optimal metagame, which is not much to do with diversity. It's more to do with, well, is objectively anything broken? Or at least that's been our tiering philosophy as of old. So in conclusion, Regenerator has made the metagame more defensive. It's not something we can get a quick fix to, and I think definitely Defog has had a large effect on it. Defog and Regenerator go hand in hand, and Regenerator is a momentum-canceling thing that a lot of bulky offense teams and balanced teams asked for, which allowed them to go more defensive. It's an ability of abilities, and that's all I can really say. Does offense still exist? Yeah, of course it does. You see offense, just not as much as you see balance, or very heavily defense-based teams. Yeah, you'll see it, but you also know that the center of the metagame is almost always going to be based on defense. And that's pretty much it. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope this video lived up to your expectations. You know, I wasn't going all, fuck Regenerator here, because I think that this is a serious metagame issue that I don't think we can just ban or treat with, like, we can't just dismiss it. I think that's ridiculous, and be like, yeah, if we get rid of it, the metagame's gonna be better. Because I feel like for things like Rocks, and for things like Regenerator, we've definitely passed that stage. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. If you ever want me to do more competitive analysis things on nuances or specific things in the metagame, leave it down in the comments below, and I will certainly respond. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.